It is Tuesday on Daily Delivery. I am Michael Rand. Happy to be back for another day. Hope everybody is having a good day out there today. Resisting the urge to just crawl back underneath the covers. Rainy here in Minnesota, gray day outside. Not a real appealing day weather-wise, the kind of day where it's kind of nice to just be inside with your favorite podcast, I would suppose. Hopefully it's this one. You're listening to it right now. Really good show coming up to get you through this gray, rainy day, if that is indeed the weather you are experiencing where you are here in Minnesota. That's what we've got, like I said. Andrew Krammer from the Star Tribune joins me here in just a few minutes to talk Vikings. He will entertain my 3 hot takeaways from Sunday's win over the Titans, and we will get into the film of that game, a much better game for quarterback Sam Darnold. Bit of a bounce back from a really some struggles against Jacksonville the week before, where he threw those 3 costly interceptions. Could have cost the Vikings even more, but they were still able to win that game too. So Andrew and I will get into all of that and more here in just a little bit. Vikings poetry follows that with my good friend Keith Rishat. Again, the only way to properly get into a win over an AFC South team is to express yourself through the power of poetry. I think he's got 3 of them for us this week, so stick around for that after I talk to Andrew. First, though, what did I miss? It occurred to me last night as I was just kind of thinking about show prep, thinking about stuff I want to write about this week, that a lot of my favorite go-to subjects of the past few years are no longer either relevant or as relevant as they used to be. I like to deal in hypotheticals. That's kind of my sweet spot. Things that might happen. Here's something that might happen. Here's why I think it should happen, and lay it all out there. And I developed a lot of pet subjects over the years. Good example of it. Vikings and Kirk Cousins. Are they going to move on from Kirk Cousins? Should they move on from Kirk Cousins? What did that look like? Who would they get to be their quarterback if they did move on? What are the salary cap implications? Here's why they should do it. Here's why quarterbacks like Kirk Cousins aren't worth the money these days, aren't worth the trouble. You shouldn't be investing big money in mid-tier quarterbacks because it's just not worth it. You'll wreck your cap. Try to make that case for, probably 4 years, going on 4 years. And then they finally got rid of him, right? They finally got rid of him this past offseason, moved on. He went to Atlanta. Atlanta is 6-5. Vikings drafted a quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, who, got hurt, but they had Sam Darnold, who was probably going to be the starter this year anyway. They're 8-2, so there you go. There's that problem solved. So I got that one solved. We got that one solved. For 2 or 3 years, it was should the Wolves trade Karl Anthony Towns? Here's why. Here's the pros and cons, the pluses and minuses. I don't think you can win with Karl Anthony Towns as your second best player, especially counting as much as he's going to count against the cap starting this season. All that stuff. And then boom, they traded him just a month or 2 ago to the Knicks. Both the Wolves and the Knicks, by the way, 8-6 now. Starting to come around a little bit. Julius Randle hitting the big game-winning shot of the day. Towns has been putting up big numbers, so both those teams may be starting to find their way a little bit. But the larger point being, that was so much fodder for me for years, and then that went away. We can still track Kirk Cousins in Atlanta. We can still track Karl Anthony Towns in New York, but it's not the same as that kind of perpetual subject that I always had. Aaron Rodgers with the Packers, even though that's not a Minnesota team, I got tons of mileage out of Aaron Rodgers speculation, just the personality he became, the polarizing figure he became, what he meant to the Packers' future, things like that. And then he's been gone for 2 years now. He's over in New York. So, again, there's still plenty to talk about, still plenty to write about, but I was struck at how a lot of those things that I'd written so much about over the years, a lot of them have been cleared up fairly recently. All of this a long preamble to say I was heartened to have a subject at least return to me a little bit, even if it's just briefly, even if I only mention it today, to have something come back to me that has been so dear to me over the years. Former Gophers coach Tim Brewster is back, baby. He is back as a head coach. He is the interim head coach in Charlotte. Charlotte just fired their head coach. This is college football, of course, that we're talking about. This is Brewster's first head coaching opportunity since leaving the Gophers, since he was fired in 2010. This is really his only other chance at the college level. He'd been a position coach, usually tight ends coach, wide receivers coach a couple times. A lot of times recruiting coordinator, a lead recruiter, because that was what he was known for when he came here. He is back, baby. He's got 2 games this year. I don't know if it'll go beyond that, but he gets 2 games to finish out the rest of the season as the head coach in Charlotte. Gave me an opportunity to revisit all my favorite Brewsterisms, watch the amazing video that they made when he was a head coach here at Minnesota, his motivational video. That was I still watch that probably once every 6 months. If everybody doesn't do that, you really should, because it is an amazing, amazing production, just kind of showing a glimpse into all of his catchphrases. Get your chili hot. When he got the job, I think his first job after the Gophers was as a wide receivers coach at Mississippi State in 2012. I actually called down to Mississippi State and called up a Chili's restaurant and asked about the temperature of their chili at the restaurants in Mississippi. So that was how obsessed I was with that story. So I'm so glad to see Brewster back in the fold. Yes, he still blocks me on Twitter/X. Probably a lot of you feel the same way. If you go look at your social media, he probably blocked you a long time ago, never reinstated you, but he can never be blocked out of our hearts. Tim Brewster is back as head coach at Charlotte for these 2 glorious games. I've got Andrew Krammer with me right now to break down the film of the 23-13 win over Tennessee. Andrew, also first, though, you must endure my 3 hot takeaways from the game. I hope you're ready for them.
Let's do it. I hope they're spicy. We can do it.
They're like medium spicy. This is not a game that had a lot of spice level to it. Let's be honest. This was a game that I'm sure the Vikings were just happy to get out of Tennessee with a win. Some weirdness in this game. Some good things to take away from it as well, which we'll get to probably more in the film review. But here are my three hot takeaways. Number 1, I think wide receiver 3 is becoming a problem. Jalen Nailor dropped another big pass. Not getting much out of that spot. And again, I know it's probably not that important. You got to pick your spots on your roster, and he has done some good things this year. I know he's caught 4 touchdowns, but not getting a lot from that spot. And again, when Jefferson's getting so much attention, I wonder if there's an upgrade coming there at some point. Maybe not this year, but at some point.
Yeah, boy, I saw too this same Sunday, the Patriots made KJ Osborne a healthy scratch, and he's kind of fallen out of favor on a 1-year deal there. I do wonder if he could find his way back. I think Jalen has had a lot of bright moments. We saw him earlier in the season, as you mentioned, but this middle of the season, you've seen maybe some kind of regression or lack of consistency. He had 2 procedural penalties. I think they were in those losses to the Rams and Lions. He dropped a pass in the red zone against the Rams.
Yeah, that's right.
That was huge. And then, he drops what would have been a touchdown on Sunday. Last week, Mark Sanchez on the broadcast was blaming him for a route on a missed throw in the end zone against the Jaguars. So, the connections are such where with Nailor, the opportunities are going to be so few that the connections got to hit when you go to him, and they just haven't. His few opportunities have not turned up. They've looked pretty bad. And I think it's little things. I think it's a player. We got to remember too, Nailor has not played a ton of football. He wasn't on the field much last year. So I think overall, this is still a guy who's developing and learning much more than a first-round pick like Jordan Addison certainly was, as he looks in the middle of his second year to be coming on when Darnold kind of makes him the focus of the passing game. So I don't think that's too spicy. I think Nailor has certainly been lacking the consistency you want from him, because when you only get 2 or 3 looks a game and you drop touchdowns or red zone passes the way he has, that's going to stick in coaches' minds. It's going to stick in the quarterback's mind, and it's probably not going to lend to him getting a ton of opportunities moving forward, short of injuries.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they don't really have a lot of other options right now. You got Brandon Powell, Trent Sherfield. I mean, both of them are pretty sure-handed. Sherfield made a good, I think, 3rd down catch when Darnold was scrambling around, but he's not, he's in there usually for run blocking downs. Powell's more of a possession receiver kind of guy. Like, Nailor has all the attributes you'd want. He just isn't really taking what has been given to him in the last 4 or 5 games and running with it. He's got all those. He's got the game breaking speed. Mm-hmm. He just needs to make more plays.
Yeah, the hands got to be there too. You just can't drop those passes. Your title is receiver. That's the one job you got to do after above all else. Once everything's done, you got to catch the ball. So I think they like him enough. They have enough trust in him that they're going to ride through this tough spot. I don't expect them to bench him from that wide receiver 3 role, but going into next offseason, it will be interesting that if he doesn't turn things around and become more of that consistent player and end on an upward trajectory, we could be seeing more of an investment, because this offseason, it was just Sherfield. It was $1 million guaranteed to bring Sherfield off kind of the scrap heap. So I do wonder if they'd invest a little bit more to bring a reliable guy in next offseason.
Number 2, Andrew. In retrospect, I know he's a warrior. I've been championing him all year. I kind of think Aaron Jones maybe could have sat this one out. He just doesn't quite look right. He looks like he's still favoring whatever happened to him when he took that hard hit last week against Jacksonville. They didn't really get the run game going at all against Tennessee. Now you got Bears game. The Bears looked a little bit better. You got some more important games coming up where you're going to need him. I kind of wish they would have sat him in this game and given him a week.
Yeah, he only played, I think, a little over 50% of the snaps. So in that second half starts with him asking out after taking just a huge hit by one of the defensive linemen. I think it was their 300-plus pound nose tackle, Tavondre Sweat, who drilled him. And you could just tell he's still feeling, whether it's just the rib injury or probably the laundry list of things he's kind of piled up at this point. The guy was averaging, going into the game, a career high 19 touches per game, or what would be if his season ended now. And he got 16 touches before really going into more of a limited role in the second half. The problem is that Cam Akers isn't like running the ball a ton better. His success rate, his efficiency is not there. They couldn't run with anybody against the Titans, who outmatched them up front. They make the change with Dalton Reisner to Ed Ingram. What you're going to lose there is an ability to move people when your technique is right. And Reisner in his first game this year didn't always look right either, much like Ed Ingram looked incorrectly when he was playing. So they've got a lot of issues up front. I think Garrett Bradbury has had a rough run through the AFC South here against some of these defensive tackles that they've got. Bradbury is a guy who will always look bad against size, and the AFC South has a lot of it. So I think internally in the O-line, that was still an issue with running the ball. But you're right, Mike. I think they got to look to ways to kind of get him right when they need him most. And I don't know if they're going to necessarily need him a ton, certainly in that game against the Titans, nor maybe against the Bears this Sunday. If he does play against Chicago, I wouldn't be shocked if we see more of a rotation or at least a concerted effort to take some snaps off of him, because you need him for the stretch run. They know how important he is. And at 8-2, maybe you at least deserve or have earned a little bit of a breathing room to sit him a little bit.
Does this kind of show us? I mean, he was their big running back free agent offseason acquisition, of course, and he's been great. He's been terrific. But does this show maybe a misguided faith in Ty Chandler as kind of the, they had to go get Akers again, and he's not been great. I mean, they just haven't really developed anybody else behind Jones that they can trust, and I kind of wonder if that's been a miss in the draft or free agency in the last couple of years.
Yeah, going into the season, they trusted Chandler in a limited capacity. They trusted him to take runs off Aaron Jones, not pass protection reps, not third down reps, because when the season started, it was C.J. Ham pretty much immediately in that role. So they had kind of a two-headed plan with Ham and Chandler to try and take reps off Jones. The problem was Chandler has been so inefficient and became so inefficient outside of one good outing against the Niners. If you look at the rest of his season, especially when he had to replace Jones in that Jets game when Jones picked up the hamstring injury, it's just been really bad for Chandler as a runner. And that's why he needs to be on the field when he's good, because he's as fast as anybody, as elusive as they've shown outside of Aaron Jones. Among their running back group, he has been very elusive. So they thought that was going to be the thing, and it just hasn't been with Chandler. So yes, I think that showed a misguided view of what he could become. And we always knew he was not going to be a third down option because he was awful at pass protecting last year. And going into this year, they frankly just haven't asked him to do it much. So they acquire Akers, reacquire Akers in the hope of getting that first and second down guy. And it's been bad matchups, but it also hasn't looked very good for Akers either.
He's just not that explosive. He's okay. He's fine, but he's not going to make anybody forget Aaron Jones usually when he's out there. Last one's probably the least spicy of all. I'm kind of going decreasing spice level here. That was, I don't think that was not Sam Darnold's best game, but that kind of feels like the blueprint for what they want going forward. I think that's kind of, if you were asking Kevin O'Connell, like what do you expect from Sam Darnold? This is kind of what he likes to see from Sam Darnold. Careful enough with the football, but not so overly cautious that he's not pushing the ball down the field. I thought he had has good a mix as he's had for a while in this game.
He has. I thought he was really good in the first half because the pass protection, the O-line was pretty bad throughout the game. Cam Robinson, your left tackle, is playing through a foot injury, and it looked like that. I would guess that bothered him just because he wasn't as powerful, got moved a little bit more against the Titans, who move a lot of people. But Darnold was moving on the run. We saw him make plays 2 3rd and 6 downs on one of their touchdown drives in the first half. He spins out of pressure, finds Sherfield, as you mentioned, on one, turns around and finds Jefferson down the other sideline for the other. Those are just plays that I can't remember who it was. I read a comment. I think it was Amani Hooker, Minneapolis' own. The Titans safety, when he said, I don't know what it is, but when quarterbacks play us, they turn into Lamar Jackson. And Sam Darnold had a little bit of that on Sunday. And so, I think Sam played pretty well for him. And in terms of the typical game they want from him, it's the 0 interceptions. He had the fumble that goes to him, but look, that pitch can be a little behind Aaron Jones. He's got to make that catch. Yeah. The running back has to corral that. I honestly think that should go on the running back, but I understand Darnold was the one with possession of the football. So I get why that stat goes to him. But it was 0 turnovers. As far as Sam's concerned, and as far as coaches should be concerned, that was a pretty clean game from Darnold. He took sacks when he needed to, instead of trying to force things downfield. He evaded tons of pressure to find guys, and it wasn't perfect. There were moments where Jefferson was left open, and he took checkdowns to Josh Oliver. So it wasn't a totally perfect, clean game, but it was a well-managed game from him when he didn't have a ton of help by the offensive line or the running game, and you allowed your defense to do, at least in the first half, what they needed to do. So, Mike, I liked what they saw, or liked what you got from Darnold. They should like what they got from Darnold. And that is the kind of game that, as long as there is 0 turnovers, basically, for your quarterback, you're going to be in most games.
Now, I do wonder, and we're kind of shifting gears here, I do wonder if, that's good enough to beat Tennessee, and they probably could have been more comfortable if they hit on a couple of things, or they don't give up the big plays, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But is that version of Sam Darnold enough to win in the playoffs? I think that's enough to get you to the playoffs, but is that enough to win in the playoffs once you start to play those better teams?
Yeah, they need more of those 47-yard touchdowns to Jordan Addison. You need more of the big plays. That was it. And so defenses are going to start pivoting to take away some of those deep balls. And we've always seen teams play Justin Jefferson like that. The difference now is that teams like Jacksonville, Tennessee, they're playing Jordan Addison like that. They're playing TJ Hawkinson like that. They're backing everybody up. And I like the pivot from Kevin O'Connell. We saw more quick hitting passes, a quick 5-yarder to Jefferson right out of the gate.
Yep, I like that too.
They started some drives with the intention of, we're just going to get the ball out quickly. That was the kind of pivot you saw that was tangible from the coaching staff, that I think if they can keep that in their bag more and then go to it quicker in games when they see that kind of stuff, that maybe they face a Cardinals defense or a Falcons defense where they're not expecting that stuff. They can pivot to it quicker in ways that they didn't against the Jaguars. So that can help you. But overall, I think this offense needs to find more of that explosive ability, even when teams are playing back behind you. And that comes with catching and running underneath, like the Addison play. That comes with maybe breaking an explosive running play once in a while, which comes with healthy Aaron Jones. I think it's been since the 34-yard touchdown against Detroit. Right. I can't think of another big run that they've had recently. So I think, they got to get Jones healthy and explosive again. He reached, I think it was 20 miles an hour on that 34-yard touchdown run. So he's still capable of it when he's right. They just have to find those counter punches that have been so few and far between in these last 3 wins.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also I feel like they did a couple different red zone things with Jefferson, where it's not always deep shots into the end zone. It's 2nd and 7 from the 15, and you get in a quick curl, something like that, where they concepts that I just really don't remember having seen them run, but that I liked that they ran and got a couple of first downs out of it.
Yeah, and it wasn't like the trick stuff where it's let's do a double reversed Brandon Powell to Jalen Naylor or whatever they were trying earlier. You're right. It seemed more of let's call the players, not the plays. Let's just find specific, unique ways to get these guys open. And it worked. It worked. And certainly they were helped by a Titans team that was called for 13 penalties.
Yeah, a lot of them, some of them of questionable nature, some of them of self-inflicted nature. Saved the defense a little bit. Let's pivot to the defense. I mean, they only give up 13 points. They're cruising like into the second half. They're like making Will Levis's life miserable. I did feel like they were hunting that safety. They were hunting a safety, and they kind of got burned on that 98-yard play. They came so close on that first down play to getting a safety. Then the Titans just like do a quarterback sneak to give them some breathing room. And I think they're thinking like, all right, man, we're going to send the house. We're going to sack Will Levis in the end zone. We're going to get a safety. And next thing you know, it's 98 the other way, and it's a ball game. But it had been working, but there was a lot of feast or famine with the defense, including another touchdown that got wiped off the board because of an Isaiah Prince, one of his three, didn't line up close enough to the line of scrimmage penalties.
Yeah, it was a wild change of events where their quarterbacks sneaking, as you mentioned, from their own 1 yard line just to please give us space to punt. That's the vibe that you're giving off if you're the Tennessee Titans. And I think the Vikings got caught sleeping a little bit. Will Levis mentioned that he saw the pre-snap communication that signified a quarters look from the defense, and he just threw right over the top of the deep safety and Josh Metellus there, who was not expecting certainly a deep ball from that spot. So I don't think there was a ton of love or respect for Will Levis going into this game from the Vikings defense, and rightfully so. Like, the guy only threw for 86 yards in the first half. But he has an arm and he trusts it. And he gave the Vikings multiple opportunities for takeaways. They only got the one from Harrison Smith at the end. But there were multiple times in that second half where you could tell whether it was Shaq Griffin falling to sleep on a 33-yarder, Cam Bynum taking a bad angle on a 30-yard catch and run by Tyler Boyd, where all of a sudden the Vikings just seemed spooked and like kind of awakened. Like, oh yeah, we're still playing. That's right. You guys are still alive in this game. I think there was a little bit of that. And also the Vikings pass rush got after Levis. And you see this at times from secondaries who get used to a strong pass rush of, well, he can't hold it that much longer, so I don't need to worry about this deep route. And then all of a sudden, boom, the ball gets thrown over your head. So I do wonder if there was some of that as well.
I think there probably was. And I think all in all, the defense still has to feel pretty good about where they're at. I mean, in this tour of the AFC South recently, they gave up 13 to Indy, but some of those were half of that. One of those touchdowns was the defensive touchdown that Indy scored on the strip sack of Darnold. Yeah. Yep. And so they've only given up seven last week to Jacksonville, and then 13 in this game. So they're definitely holding up their end of the bargain. I think the explosive plays from Tennessee probably caught them off guard, and they caught me off guard too.
Yeah, and that goes to show you too that if they're the ways that this defense has been beaten have been some explosive plays downfield. They've given up yardage. They've been decent in red zone, decent in points, but if you can pick apart the zones, because they don't play a ton of man-to-man coverage, and if you can protect against their pressures to leverage those holes in the zones, you can pick them apart a little bit. And I think Levis is not a guy you're ever going to be scared of, nor is he somebody you think is going to do that again. But Detroit, who's a team that's kind of built to do that, and we saw them just steamroll the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team that you struggled with the week before. There are teams that are built to beat them. So that's the concerning part, is it wasn't quite a foot on the throat kind of win in ways that you see the great teams do it. But then again, as I think Chip Scoggins pointed out in the paper today, the expectations for this Vikings team were not 8-2 through 10 games. Nobody expected this.
No, they didn't. And the fact that they're 8-2 is a credit to a lot of the things that were nitpicking. But that's what you can do when you're 8-2. You see the potential with the team that's 8-2. You see them start the year probably playing certainly better than they are right now and having more lopsided results. And I think they reset expectations, almost a victim of their own success since that start to the year. But again, they get to play Chicago next week, another young quarterback for Brian Flores to have some fun with. Caleb Williams, although they seem a little bit more functional now that they've changed offensive direction, fired their offensive coordinator. They probably should have beaten the Packers yesterday. They had the upper hand in that game, just had a field goal blocked at the end, and they could have won that game. But that will be more of a test than it might have been 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I think the result that actually, or the play that bothered Vikings fans most was that blocked kick. Was just, how do you let Green Bay get off the hook like that? I think Vikings fans wanted to see Green Bay lose just for the heck of it, and also to help them in their wild card chase. But Chicago is not a pushover. Their defense has a lot of talent on it. I think running the football with or without Aaron Jones is going to be just as hard against Chicago's front. And you got to like the matchup of Brian Flores against Caleb Williams, but Caleb Williams has an ability to create on the run in a way that not too many of the quarterbacks they've faced have. I think Will Levis has always been more of a turnover-prone, kind of mistake-prone quarterback, even at this stage of Williams' career, which I know has been some struggles recently. But they had a new play caller. They leaned into Caleb Williams as a runner. They got the ball to DJ Moore, which had been a struggle for them beforehand. So they seem to have a clear focus under Thomas Brown, the new coordinator, who used to work with Kevin O'Connell in Los Angeles. So the Vikings will know their new play caller in Chicago pretty well.
Interesting. Well, we'll talk about that next week, Andrew. Appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.
Sounds good, Mike. Thanks.
Great stuff from Andrew. I think the offensive line bears watching. Speaking of subjects that have been near and dear to my heart over the years, Kevin O'Connell praised Dalton Reisner on Monday, said he liked the veteran leadership he brought, liked the moxie he brought to winning some of those hard downs that he likes to talk about, but I still don't think this line is exactly where they want it to be. The interior push is not where they want it to be in terms of the run game, so that does bear watching. Sam Darnold generally will need better protection. He will need more of a run game if he is going to succeed over these next 7 games and likely the playoffs.
Watch your dreams and savings grow with Royal Credit Union's 4.25% annual percentage yield 12-month certificate. Open now at any Royal office or online at rcu.org/certificate saver. Early withdrawal penalties could reduce earnings and principal. APY accurate as of 2/1/25. Insured by NCUA.
It's poetry time on Daily Delivery. Keith Rashad has 3 poems, 3 haikus to describe that 23-13 win over the Titans. Not the most scintillating game.
I had to dig deep.
You
I had to dig deep. Michael Rand of the Star Tribune. It was a tough one to search my soul with that game. Okay.
Well, I'm glad you were able to search your soul. And if all you found in your soul was 3 haikus, then that's what we have to live with. Number 1, please.
A nothing contest. Totally forgettable. Like John Marthaler.
Poor John. He's just taking broadsides from you every week. Yeah, I mean, the most memorable play was probably that stupid 98-yard touchdown they gave up that actually made it a game.
You will not remember this game even 2 weeks from now. You will not remember that they played this game. This is one of those games, like last week's game, you will remember because it was so stupid, right? It took 4 field goals to win that dumb game. This was just about the most blah, uninteresting game that I have. And so we went to the place in Tucson where the Vikings came, and the normal people who we kind of sit with weren't there. So that was sort of weird. And there was other weird things about it. And my son wanted to go home at halftime. And so I heard the 98-yard touchdown on the radio coming back. And then we just came back and I watched Sunday Ticket because there was nothing. Like, that's a bad team. That's not a rival. That's not anything. You will not remember a thing about this game in 2 weeks. And we actually have a mutual acquaintance who attended the game in Tennessee, right? And I'm not sure that this guy will ever remember what happened at that game.
No.
It was just boring and pointless, which is fine. It's better that you have a boring and pointless win than a loss, to be on the Tennessee end of this. But man, that was just uninteresting.
It was uninteresting. And I guess the nicest thing I will say is that the Vikings have had plenty of regimes where they will find a way to lose boring games like this. I appreciate that Kevin O'Connell has enough, whether it's strategy, preparedness, talent on this team, whatever it is, they more often than not are able to win these kind of nondescript games so far, especially this season. We've seen them have coaches that have struggled in situations like this.
Yes, we have. And, I am pushing 50. We're getting closer and closer to that magic number, which means that exactly as we talked about last week, I have seen them lose this game 100 times during the course of my life. Right? They only played 16 games for so long. I've seen them lose 100 of these games against an inferior opponent, and that somehow reached up and had a magical day or whatever the case may be. So it's, in some respects, it's not really a complaint, which is we'll get to that in a little bit, but it's just an acknowledgement that was not scintillating.
No, it is not.
Much like
more scintillating is your poetry. Number 2, please.
Okay. The so-called experts did not see this year coming, yet they still get paid.
Yeah, I'm still getting paid. I thought they were going to be 7-10. Guess what? I still got paid.
Yeah, 10 games into the season. 10 games into the season, and they've blown past your win prediction.
And the over-under in Vegas was like 6.5, so everybody was wrong. We were all wrong. And I've pointed this out on the show a couple times. Like, I asked O'Connell about this like last month. I'm like, what were we so wrong about? How did we get you guys so wrong? And he had a good, thoughtful answer.
Did he call you stupid?
He did not call me stupid.
You guys are a bunch of idiots? You don't know what you're talking about?
Which was nice. I mean, he kind of did, but not in those words. Basically, he's like, we get a lot longer to see these guys than you do, and we had a lot more internal belief. We saw what we had. We thought we liked what we had. A good coach answer. But some of it too is just that, like, you don't know. Nobody really knows until you start playing. And then we watched them play the Giants, who now have finally mercifully benched Daniel Jones. And that was not a great game, but it's like, okay, I wasn't sure they were going to win this game. They won 28-6. Do we need to revise expectations? Then they beat Houston. Then they beat San Francisco. Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, maybe this team is pretty good. So, sometimes you just got to be a little bit patient. But yes, the experts, and I certainly consider myself an expert, we were definitely wrong about this team.
Well, it speaks to actually a different point that I want to talk about too.
Well, I'm glad I talked for 2 minutes about something else.
Yeah, that's fine. The expert who's still getting paid for all this is blah, blah, blahing yet again. How shocking. Anyway.
Yes. I was going to talk my way out of it.
You give it your best shot. The other thing I want to talk about, though, is how it's an issue of perspective as well, too. That I feel like there's been a lot of complaining about the victories in the last few weeks.
Yes, I agree.
And a lot of whining about the victories. They have surpassed everybody's projections for wins 10 games into the season.
Yeah.
We are 10. They are 8-2. And we are getting people whining about the victories, right?
Yes.
And nobody, again, all the experts would have told you this was at best a middling season. Yeah. And they are having a very successful season.
Yes.
Yet we are figuring out ways, much like John Marthaler always seems to complain about the victories, right?
True. He does.
And it is baffling to me. It is baffling that there is so much whine. And I get it. Like, I just talked about how it was uninspiring to watch. It wasn't scintillating.
No, it wasn't.
But it was still a win and pretty workmanlike. And Sam Darnold sure looked a lot better than he did last week, right?
Yes.
And, maybe not Hall of Fame worthy, but much better than we've seen.
Yes.
And I think the problem is, one is people are greedy, right? As soon as they start winning, all of a sudden it's like, oh, we really, right? If you talk to anybody and you say they're going to be 8-2, everybody would have been happy with that, right? I think the other part of the problem is that we're still staring up at the Lions, who are probably the best team in the sport right now. And so you combine the fact that people get real greedy, right, with the fact that we're still standing behind another team. And then all of a sudden you get all of this whining about a team that's 8-2 that nobody expected to be 8-2. Yes. And it's so stupid. Like, it's not as dumb as 2 years ago with our season of whimsy.
Right. It's different. It definitely
but this
different.
still amazing, and they're almost a lock to make the playoffs. They would truly have to collapse at this point, and then you get into the playoffs, and that's where the fun really begins. And who knows what happens? So I just find it strange that well, I guess I don't. Find it strange that Vikings fans are whining and crying, because I've done my share of that.
Everybody worries about style points at a certain point. They want it to look better, but it's kind of like your grades in high school, like anybody's grades in high school. Like as long as you graduate, nobody really remembers what your GPA was in high school. As long as you make the playoffs, like nobody really remembers.
For that, by the way.
Nobody cares.
I'm not sure I would have been a college professor if we had cared about those high school grades.
That's a perfect example. Like nobody really cares. Like as long as you make it through, like nobody's going to go back and check. Like, oh well, back in undergrad, you got a D in Greek philosophy. Shouldn't have done that.
No, it was Greek history.
Greek history. Greek history
from 400 BC to 200 BC.
Yes.
Taught by a man old enough to have seen Greek history from 400 BC to 200 BC.
Maybe not the greatest idea that we shared books for that class.
No.
Maybe not the greatest idea that we took that class, because it was like a 5,000 level class. We were in there with a bunch of graduate students. Spring semester, we didn't care. Anyway, nobody cares about your GPA though. You know, you start doing your job. That's all anybody cares about. Nobody cares how you did in school anymore. They just want to know that you can do the job, and that's what the Vikings are doing right now.
Well, and then the other part about it is that, like I said before, this is not the same feeling as the season of whimsy. The season of whimsy was just winning coin flip after coin flip, and it's like, well, isn't that fun? And you knew it was going to collapse. This feels at least a little bit more real and authentic, even if you can still see holes in the team.
100%. All right, number 3, please.
Much hurt on both sides, but that happens when you play a bunch of cheaters.
Who's the cheaters? Tennessee.
How many hits out of bounds were there?
How many
like face masks? There was a horse collar in there.
Well, the horse collar was they missed. The horse collar was bad. That should have been he grabbed the shoulder pad. They kind of missed that one, but
it was still way out of bounds.
Yes, it was way out of bounds. Tennessee plays right on the edge. Tennessee got about 4 bad calls that went against them in this game. Like their coach was right.
They don't play on the edge. They play over the edge.
They play over the edge. Yeah. Yes. They're not a very disciplined team. They've got some discipline issues, but they also got hosed on a few of those calls. Like nobody remembers. Like Vikings fans never remember the games where they got all the breaks. This was one of those games where they kind of got almost all the breaks anyway. That's
karma. Right. And actually, I really don't think it's karma. I think we fully misunderstand the concept of karma. But for the purposes of this conversation, I'm going to say that it's karma because they were smacking people out of bounds. And that hit on Addison was that was, I guess I would say defenseless receiver. Yeah. But in a different era, it would certainly be a clean football.
It was borderline. Hit. It was borderline.
But I can see why they called goodness, that was the meanest looking hit I have seen in a while. Oh,
yes. Oh, and that poor number 68 for Jacksonville, who couldn't figure out that you're supposed to line up on the line of scrimmage when you're an offensive lineman. They called him 3 times, negated like a touchdown, another like 25-yard gain. That's just like fundamental coaching 101. Like once it happens once, make sure it doesn't happen again. He did it 3 times before they took him out of the game.
Well, that's what happens when the specter of Andrew Van Ginkel haunts you. Whoa!
That guy, he's great. I love Van Ginkel. He's great.
Well, and who's the other defensive lineman too?
Grenard, Cashman.
Yes.
Yeah, Grenard's great too.
Those were some real nice signings that have helped this team succeed in the way that all of the experts, including Michael Rand of the Star Tribune, did not expect.
Still cashing those checks, though. Excellent award-winning edition of Vikings Poetry. Poor John Marthaler, by the way, should get a chance to rebut everything Keith said. I'm expecting to have John on Wednesday's show, hoping to at least have John on Wednesday's show to talk Minnesota United soccer. So maybe he will have some things to say in his own defense and maybe taking some shots at Keith. I hope so. That is all we can hope for. Let's finish quickly with the cooler. Sounds like the Wild could have a couple key players back tonight when they play St. Louis. Joel Eriksson-Ek could be back tonight. Jonas Brodin could be back tonight. Both those guys practiced on Monday. Eriksson-Ek practicing on a line with Kirill Kaprizov and Matt Boldy. That would be a super line. Still reuniting that line because of the injury to Matt Zuccarello. He'll be out for a while, but getting those two other guys back would be huge for the Wild as they start a 3-game road trip in St. Louis. They need all the help they can get. That will do it for me today. Like I said, hoping to have John Marthaler on tomorrow's show. Should have Randy Johnson with the Gopher Football update as well. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Back at it again tomorrow.